accept the recording request so that recording will start automatically. Okay, yes, good. So now everyone has accepted the recording and it started recording. Okay, so uh, good morning, everyone. My name is Ranjan, and I'm going to present you this introduction to this Angular course. Okay, we'll be understanding how what is this Angular and why it is beneficial to use it. Okay, we'll be discussing about it. So we'll be learning Angular 10, or trying to learn Angular 10 and trying to understand what Angular 10 is all about. Okay, so whenever we try to learn any new technology, okay, these are the questions we need to ask, right? What is Angular? Where to use it? Okay, when it got started, why to use Angular? How it is, how to use it, and who is going to use it? So we'll be understanding about the what part first. Then obviously who is going to use it? It's us because we are here to understand it. How part will be understanding over the period of time, right? How we can use Angular, that is what we will be understanding over the period of time. And we'll be discussing about the when and why part and where to use it. Okay. So if you simply go by the definition, okay, what is Angular? Okay, Angular is a JavaScript framework, platform and framework for building single-page client applications using HTML and TypeScript. Okay, so coming back to some background. Okay, earlier when the web started, it used to be only simple static HTML pages, right? Then the server-side frameworks came into picture because the static HTML websites were only providing the read-only information. They are not capable to understand what if the user is entering some data in that HTML elements, what needs to be done or what it is going to do for the processing part. Pure HTML, the simple HTML was it was lacking that particular capability. That is why the server-side frameworks like ASP.NET, JSP, PSP, they came into picture and they fill that void. And web got popular. People started to take websites seriously for their business, and it basically changed the whole ecosystem. Right, the websites basically changed the whole ecosystem of the world, the technology world. So that is how it came into picture. Then ev- earlier what was happening, all the validations were done in the server side. Then people started to think in the direction that how we can do some delegate some of this responsibility to the client's browser. That is how this JavaScript came into picture. Okay, so what is happening? What happened with the JavaScript is it started with the basic validation thing, but people started to like how it is executing some code in the client's browser and it is providing us with the basic validations and all. People started to think in the direction how we can improve it. Okay, so there is always a room for improvement, right? So people started to think in how we can implement Java or use JavaScript more and more. So that is how all this DOM manipulation, this document object model manipulation, browser object model manipulation, right? Then the XML HTTP request came into picture in JavaScript. So JavaScript become like indispensable part of any website or any web application. Then, right? People started to use JavaScript extensively. It become extremely popular. Then obviously there was JavaScript used to run in where it is running in the client's browser only, right? So it is not easy to install any framework because all these browsers are separate entities. They all used to have their they all have their own JavaScript engine. Let's say Google Chrome is having its own JavaScript engine called V8. So Microsoft is having its JavaScript engine called Chakra. So similarly, all the browsers are having their own JavaScript engines, which compiles our JavaScript code and gives us the required output. So if we are talking about Java or .NET or PHP, those kind of frameworks, so when I'm installing or when I'm targeting to use .NET, then I need to install the .NET framework in the server. Then only it works, right? So because the server side frameworks, they are installed in a limited places, it is easier to implement any libraries and all in the frameworks, in the servers. But same is not the case with JavaScript, because JavaScript is independently running in millions of browsers or billions of browsers it is running in. So we cannot directly implement the libraries in all those browsers. That is why there was no initially there was no concept of library in JavaScript, but because of the extensive use of JavaScript, they started to have libraries like jQuery and all. But these libraries used to follow what JavaScript used to do. Okay, so what by using JavaScript, what we are doing is we are simply, once the DOM is loaded, then only our JavaScript start working, right? Our JavaScript code start executing once the DOM is loaded. But when I'm talking about these libraries, they also followed the same practice. So if you see the library code, it is simple JavaScript only. Yes, it has simplified the developer's life. It is using this library like jQuery and all. We were required to write less amount of code, but still it was following the same approach what JavaScript was following, right? Obviously, because of the extensive use of JavaScript, people started to think in the direction how we can take leverage of JavaScript more. So that is how the concept of a framework came into picture, right? So how we will be using JavaScript then? We will be using JavaScript as a framework. That means what? It is going to take control of the DOM even before it starts, even before it is created. So now my framework will take control of the DOM. It will create the DOM for me and it will control the DOM, right? This is where this JavaScript framework concept came into picture. So if we can talk about JavaScript frameworks, we can think Angular JS is a JavaScript framework. Angular is a JavaScript framework. Okay, both these products are from Google, right? You know, so these are what JavaScript frameworks. It has their own syntaxes. We'll be mixing up the Java our framework syntax. When I'm talking about framework syntax, what do I mean? I'm talking about the Angular framework syntax or Angular JS framework syntax, right? We normally do what? We mix up the framework syntax along with the HTML directly, and based on our syntax, we get the required, the desired output, right? This is why these frameworks they become extremely popular. If you think about AngularJS, it started in 2011, and it became like a wildfire. People started to use it very heavily, in AngularJS, right? It became the most popular JavaScript framework, when it started. It become extremely popular. Now also it is very popular. Now also, millions of websites they run in using AngularJS. But yes, because if you think about the Google's business policy, they always look for how to introduce new things, how to add new features into the existing products and all. But if you think about how Google did it, they thought, okay, AngularJS is good. AngularJS is solving its own purposes. It is providing us very extensive, scalable web applications. But they had to follow a new architectural pattern. Okay, because one of the fundamental question was in AngularJS we were using JavaScript, right? We were using JavaScript as the as the syntax to write the develop the AngularJS applications. But if you normally think about the programming world, okay, what is happening is most of the developers are from object-oriented programming background, right? Most of the developers are from object-oriented programming background. So, and JavaScript is what? It's a procedure-oriented programming language, right? That means what happens here is there is a major difference in the fundamentals. In JavaScript and object-oriented programming, the function-oriented or object-oriented programming languages, there is a mindset difference. If you are from the object-oriented programming background, to solve any problem, you have a mindset that is derived from the object-oriented programming. But when you are a procedure-oriented programming developer, that means the mindset to solve any programming problem or problem flow. If you are trying to implement any programming logic, you will think in the perspective of the procedure-oriented language, right? But that is why they thought, okay, why not introduce something, okay, which will cater both. We'll be creating the JavaScript framework, but we'll be using the object-oriented mindset because most of the developers in the world are object-oriented programming developers, right? Object-oriented developers, right? So they started to, they started, and they also had to, implement a new architectural pattern compared to the AngularJS. Although AngularJS was pretty popular and it was creating like this heavy applications, or many applications were created and still being used in AngularJS. They thought, why not implement a new thing? Okay, with the object-oriented mindset, they started to use this language called TypeScript. If you think AngularJS was being developed using the language JavaScript, and they thought, okay, why not implement a new thing in using this object-oriented programming language called TypeScript. So this TypeScript is basically what it is, a Microsoft developed or Microsoft maintained programming language. So it is basically a superset of JavaScript only. Okay, if you can think of TypeScript, it is a superset of JavaScript only. So because my browser do not understand anything apart from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, ultimately, no matter I'm using TypeScript or anything, it needs to be converted into JavaScript. So what happens here is, with the case of TypeScript, whatever syntax we are writing using TypeScript, okay, ultimately it is going to be transpiled into plain JavaScript. Okay, the TypeScript compiler is going to be converting the TypeScript syntax into JavaScript. We call that process as transpilation. Okay, so whatever syntax, let's say we are writing a class in TypeScript, ultimately that is going to be converted into equivalent JavaScript because my browser is not going to understand the TypeScript language. But because TypeScript is an object-oriented programming language, okay, that transpilation process is going to be taken care by the compiler itself. We do not need to worry about that part, right? But as a developer, what I'm facing with, or what I'm dealing with, I'm dealing with a language which is object oriented. Still, I'm doing the front end part of the application. Still, I'm doing the JavaScript part of the application using object oriented language with almost all the object oriented features available. That basically become much more adaptable compared to the JavaScript. So because that is what it is basically allowing the object oriented developers, or the developers, to implement object oriented approaches into the front end application also. Okay, that is why Angular also become extremely popular. Okay, just like AngularJS, Angular become extremely popular. Then obviously, if we think about a few improvement areas, yes, AngularJS was developed in 2011 and they have upgraded it accordingly over the period of time. Because Angular they started, they released the first version of Angular as Angular 2 in 2016. Obviously, there is a 5 years gap, so they will be they'll be implementing few new features which was not available back in 5 years back. 5 years time is a very big time in the technology ecosystem, right? They introduced some new concepts in the Angular which was not earlier implemented in AngularJS, because that time whatever was available, it was the best for AngularJS. And when in 2016 they released it with few new features. Okay, that is why although AngularJS was working pretty well, Angular become also popular with the developers. Okay, now I'm talking about this. What is Angular means? Angular is a platform and framework for building single-page client applications. Using HTML and TypeScript. When I say single-page client application, we all know about single-page application architecture. It is the architectural pattern, right? If you think about single-page applications, what it is all about. So if you think about it, it is basically, if you think about the mobile applications, right? When you are talking about any Android application, okay, let's say I'm using Facebook or Gmail or any other Android application I'm trying to use. What do I do then? Okay, first I install the application in the Android device, right? Then I start using it. What do I mean when I say installing the Android application? That means what? I'm basically installing the UI part. I'm basically downloading the UI code, or the code that is required to control the UI part of the application. I'm downloading it and putting it in the mobile device memory. Then for the data part, I'm connecting to the RESTful services and fetching the data in the runtime. Okay. So the thing is, that means what? That is basically, that is why mobile applications are much easier, provide better user experience to the user. Okay, that is why mobile applications become extremely popular, right? Since that become popular, people started to take inspiration from that and started to develop a strategy how we can, although we cannot directly install any applications in the browser, how can we simulate this kind of process? How can we make all this code, all these artifacts available to run or control the UI part of the application? How can we make them available in the client's browser even before the first time use of the application? Okay, if you think that, then what they started to do is they derived an architectural pattern called single page application architecture. Earlier, what used to happen is all the pages that is required to be displayed in an application, it used to be independent pages. Now they did what? They basically created, they had a single page, okay, which is going to be downloaded when the user is trying to access for that web application for the first time. The first page or the main page or the index page, we normally in the technology ecosystem or in the single page application ecosystem, we call it was index.html. Although it is not the rule to call it index.html, we may give it any name we want. But normally, popularly, we call it as index.html. Okay. So the index.html is going to be loaded in the browser for the first time user is trying to access for that application. Okay. And along with the index.html, all the code that is required to control the UI part of the application, it is going to be downloaded to the client's browser in the beginning itself. That means even before the user is is accessing the website for the first time, okay, all the artifacts required to control this application, UI side of the application, is already available in the client's browser. Now all it need to do is, because all the application is already available, the whole application is already available in the client's browser memory. All it need to do is it just need to pick the pieces of the HTML what it need to display in the web page, and it will it is already having the code which is required to control that piece of HTML. It is just need to put the pieces together and construct our application, you know, and that is going to do what? That is going to give us a better user experience. The user is going to feel like as if it is using a mobile application, or all there is no page reloading and all. The data that is required, it is being pulled from the API in the background, okay, and it is getting updated in the front end without refreshing, without reloading the page. That provided a very good user experience. That is the reason this single page application architecture is it became extremely popular in the technology ecosystem. Any questions so far?
I think I'm good. So, anyone have any queries?
No.
Yeah, we are good.
Okay. Coming back to the Angular, okay. So we discussed about what Angular is. Okay, Angular is a platform and framework for building single-page client applications using HTML and TypeScript. Okay, ultimately what it will be doing, because as I said, my browser do not understand TypeScript or any other, C# or .NET, any other language. My browser do not understand any of this. So ultimately, what is going to happen is my browser only understands HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So whatever application we'll be creating, it will be converted by the Angular framework. Angular framework will do what? It is going to convert my application into simple HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Okay, that is what it is going to do. Then we discussed about single page application, right? Single page application is SPA, we normally call it, is an app that does not need to reload the page during its use and works within a browser. Almost all the more popular websites nowadays are what? These are single page applications now. Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, all these are single page applications now. Okay. Index.html contains the main page for the application. Okay. And this is often the only web page of the application. Angular uses single page application architecture to build the application. Okay. Now, in order to understand Angular, what are the prerequisites we need to have? We need to obviously understand HTML. We need to have knowledge on CSS. Okay. We need to have knowledge on JavaScript, and having knowledge of the object-oriented programming concept like C# or Java, C++ will be the added advantage, because We'll be using TypeScript, and I'm sure you guys are from like you guys have knowledge on on JavaScript and both JavaScript and .NET as well. So it is going to be very easy for you. Okay, I'll be just explaining what are the things we'll be covering in this particular course. Okay, so we'll be covering the core features of Angular. Okay, so what are the core features? We'll be understanding how the how Angular application loads in the browser, and how it is getting started. Like the application architecture, will be trying to understand in the beginning. Once we understand that, we'll be understanding the most important aspect of this Angular application, that is called component. Okay, in AngularJS, it used to be the controller, which was the most important actor in the AngularJS application. Here you can call it as a component. Okay, so AngularJS was based on what? It was based on model view controller approach. So it was following the MVC approach. Okay, and here it is a component based architecture. Okay, that was model view controller architecture, and it is component based architecture. So everything that is being displayed in the UI, it is a part of a component in the Angular application. Anything that is being displayed in the UI, that is a part of a component. That means a component is going to do what? It is going to control the whole screen and its small parts. Okay, we can create any number of components just like the AngularJS controllers. Okay, we can put another controller's view in the parent components view, right? That is what we can do, right? The same thing we'll be able to do here. We will be creating components, and that is going to be controlling the UI part of our application. Then we're going to have pipes. So you can think about pipes as the filters available in AngularJS. Okay, we'll be transforming the output of using the pipes. We'll be understanding about what are the inbuilt pipes available, and how we can write our custom pipes. Okay, then we'll be understanding about directives. It is similar to the directives which are available in AngularJS. Okay, then we'll be understanding about services and dependency injection. Then we'll be understanding about data binding. So in AngularJS, we use the scope variable to do the data binding. Here it is also very simple to use. There are different types of data binding available. If you can think of the data binding, they have divided it into four parts here. One is your string interpolation, property binding, event binding, and two-way binding. So we'll be understanding the different type of data bindings available. Okay. Coming to the next part is your routing. So also here also we can implement routing, right? We'll be understanding about the primary route, secondary route, how we can pass and retrieve the query parameters, how we can pass and retrieve the optional parameters. Okay, route parameters. All those things will be we'll be understanding about it. Apart from that, we'll be understanding about various route guards. So let's say how we can enable how let's say in certain condition I want to, let's say if the user is not authenticated, I do not want the user to be able to access that route. So I can put some route guards there. I'm not sure about how if it is available in AngularJS, because like I lost touch from AngularJS from last 4 5 years, so I kind of not being able to remember it. Okay, I lost touch a little bit. I'm not sure if it is available in AngularJS, but here we have a concept called route can activate and route can deactivate. So in order to activate a route, we can put a checkpoint. If the use, let's say I will put my logic here. Let's say for example, if the user is authenticated, he will be able to access this route. If the user ID is valid, or let's say if the product ID is valid, then only activate the product details route. So these kind of scenarios will be implementing here. Okay, that means I'm putting a checkpoint or I'm putting a guard before activating a route. Similarly, before deactivating a route, also we can put guard. That means if let's say the user is inside a form is open, and let's say the user has wrongly clicked on some other link. Okay, we'll just check the form state. If the form is entered. If the form is dirty, then we will ask the user, okay, boss, you are trying to navigate away from this current route. Do you want to deactivate it? If the user still says yes, we will allow the user to deactivate. So we'll kind of put a checkpoint there, okay, whether or not the user is actually trying to deactivate it. So these kind of guards we'll be putting. Apart from that, we'll be putting some resolvers. Like no, let's say sometimes what happens is when we are making an HTTP request, that HTTP request sometime get delayed or take some time. So normally we will do what? We will try to preface the data before activating the route. Okay, we will try to preface the data by using the resolvers. So those things will be implementing in the routing. Okay. Apart from that, we'll be understanding about forms. There are two types of forms available in Angular. One is the template-driven form. Okay, template-driven form is the simplest way. Okay, it is the HTML-driven form. Then we have another form named reactive form. That is what that is basically, allow you to create dynamic forms. If you want to add any elements dynamically, okay, and let's say I want to add certain validation rules dynamically. If certain condition is true, let's say I have a notification type. Okay, if the notification by default the mobile number is not. Let's say I'm just giving one example of this. Let's say if the mobile number is not, it is not a mandatory field by default. But if the user is selecting the notification type as mobile, then only the mobile number is going to be mandatory. So we are doing what? We are dynamically adding or removing the validations from that for that particular element. Okay, so those things can be easily done using the reactive forms. Okay. Apart from that, we'll be understanding about how we can use the HTTP services and RESTful service API integration. Okay, then we'll be understanding about modules. Here comes the interesting part. This is one of the major improvements which we have in Angular. Okay, we have what? We have like in Angular JS also we have modules, but here they have in Angular they have introduced a new concept called lazy loading. Okay, here what we can load any Angular module on demand when the user is trying to access that or that particular module for the first time. So it is optional thing if you want to implement. Obviously, it makes your application more, much more easy. Okay, it is going to give you a better performance if you are just splitting your application into multiple modules and lazy load the modules on demand. That is one of the good features they have implemented in Angular. Okay, and what we discussed in the previous slide are the core concepts of Angular which we'll be discussing. Apart from that, what we'll be we'll be understanding a new thing called observables. I'm not sure if you guys have used observables in AngularJS or not, because as far as I know, in AngularJS we used to use promises extensively, right? And there is this new library called RxJS, which help us to do asynchronous programming using observables. And Angular libraries itself use observables extensively. Although it is a third-party library, Angular itself uses this observables extensively. Okay, so they do what we'll be understanding about how we can implement what basically observable is doing. So if you are understanding observables in a good way, okay, we'll be able to do what? We'll be able to easily scale our application, or we easily implement a lot of features in our application. Okay, we'll be comparing it with the promises. So how it is, what other thing it is offering compared to the promises. We'll be understanding about that. Coming to the authentication and authorization, we'll be implementing a JWT token here. Okay, we'll be implementing the JWT token in the server side application, or the API side. We'll be implementing how we can, once the user is signing in, okay, we need to create a token for it, and we need to pass it to the client. Then in the subsequent request, the client need to send that token back to the server in order to receive the data. We'll be implementing authorization in the server side part. So if the user is sending a valid token, we will be responding back with the response, or else we'll be giving the unauthorized error and all. Okay. Then we'll be understanding, we'll be implementing, or we'll be using this command line utility called Angular CLI. Okay. Uh, so this Angular CLI help us to do what? This help us to create the Angular application and manage the Angular application. Manage different parts of our Angular application. So if you want to create a controller, sorry, component, if you want to create a directive, you want to create a pipe or service, you will be just running a command and it will be creating the components, directives, services, and pipes for you in a easy manner. Okay, it will be very easy to. It is very easy to create any component, so it follows the best practices and all. And in order to create the Angular application, also you can just run a command and it will create the application for you with all the with all the best practices implemented already in it. Okay. And also it allows you to add packages also. They have recently introduced these things in the Angular CLI. We'll be understanding about it. Okay. Apart from that, we'll be understanding how we can do state management. So there is a library called NGRX that help us to do state management in an efficient manner in the Angular application. So it basically uses the Redux pattern. The Redux is from the React.js. So for React.js, it is the Redux. For Angular, it is basically what NGRX will be using for doing the state management. Okay. So ultimately, when we'll be implementing authentication and authorization, we'll be implementing what we'll be storing that token in the NGRX tool. Okay. We'll be seeing that example how we can do state management using NGRX. Okay. Then obviously we'll be discussing about how we can lazy load the modules to improve performance, because if you are loading the modules on demand, that is going to improve the performance of the application, because not all the users are having access to all the modules. So we will not be loading all the modules for all the users. So whenever the user is trying to access any set of any set of route which is from a particular module, then only we'll be loading that module to the client's browser memory. Okay. Obviously, then we'll be understanding TypeScript. So we'll be doing what? We'll be understanding TypeScript gradually. Okay. We'll be understanding how we can write. We'll be introducing the syntaxes as and when required for TypeScript. Okay. It's a simple language. We do not need to worry about. If you are from the C# background, then it is very easy to understand. It is not having any complications at all. Okay. Then obviously for the UI part, okay, we'll be understanding about couple of UI libraries. We'll be understanding about the Angular material, that is the official UI library from Angular. Okay, it is the most popular UI library available in the Angular ecosystem. Apart from that, we'll be understanding about another UI library that is becoming much popular nowadays. Okay, although it is the second best if you see the number of downloads after Angular material, it is the second one, that is PrimeNG. Because PrimeNG is what it is. It is providing a lot of features, UI features for the Angular application. So that is why we'll be implementing the top two, UI libraries. We'll be understanding how we can integrate these two UI libraries. What is the best practice to implement these UI libraries? How we can do it in the best possible manner. Then we will see a couple of examples how we can start using the UI components available in those UI libraries. Okay, that will help us to understand how we can implement those. Okay, so obviously that other library is called PrimeNG. So this stars and grids are the part of the PrimeNG library. We'll be understanding that. Okay, then we'll be understanding how we can write unit test cases, because nowadays all the most of the companies they try to write unit test cases for their applications. We'll be understanding how we can write unit test cases for our applications. Okay, and obviously we'll be using the .NET Core Web API integration with the Angular application. Okay, coming back to the background of the Angular framework. So we used to have obviously Angular JS WonderText. We used to do have that, right? Then first version of the Angular, because both the products are what These are those both these products are from Google only. Okay, the first version of Angular was released with the name. So the WonderText, it was Angular JS WonderText because it was using JavaScript as a language. But from version 2, where they introduced this TypeScript thing, okay, they call it Angular 2. Okay, it was released on what 14 September 2016. After that, they released versions like 4, 5. There was no 3 actually. There is a history for that. One of the router packages was conflicting with the name with 3. That is why they skipped the release number 3. I mean, they did not give a Angular 3 name. Rather, they did what? After Angular 2, it was Angular 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Angular 11 just got released 8, 10 days back. Angular 11 released in Angular, in December 9. Okay, but don't worry about these version numbers. Okay, more or less the core concepts are still the same. What it used to be there in Angular 2, the core concepts are still the same. Only thing is they do some bug fixes in their framework and all, right? And th there are three major releases in Angular until now. Two was one. Okay, obviously that was the first version it got released for Angular, that is Angular 2. So that was the major release. Then in Angular 4, they improved, they modified their rendering engine. They introduced a new rendering engine in Angular 4. Now with Angular 9 is a major release with the implementation of Ivy compiler and runtime. Okay, so what happens here is actually they need to compete with the competitors, right? Like React.js and other libraries, they need to compete with them. So because React.js bundle size, the bundles which React.js was creating, it was of smaller size. They had to compete with the React.js. That is why they introduced this new rendering engine. When I say rendering engine, what do I mean is, see, ultimately when we are writing any syntax using this framework like, using this framework like Angular or AngularJS, so ultimately that syntax, you know, is getting converted into HTML, right? Ultimate result we are seeing it in HTML, right? So to to perform that action obeying that syntax, who is going to take care of that? It is taken care by the rendering engine available in the framework. Okay. So let's say in Angular there used to be the other rendering engine which was available. They have introduced this new rendering engine made available in Angular 9. They released it. Okay. So now the bundle sizes are comparatively very small. Okay, and it is doing very good. This Ivy compiler is extremely good. Obviously, because it is a framework thing, we do not directly manipulate with the Ivy rendering engine. But yes, it helps to improve this application in a much better way. Okay, so Angular 9 was a major release with the implementation of Ivy compiler and runtime. Ivy is the code name for Angular's next generation compilation and rendering pipeline. Okay, Ivy provides the smaller bundle size. Okay, all new versions are got backward compatible. As I said a few minutes back. So the core concept is still the same. They have introduced few new syntaxes here and there. They did not make a wholesale change. Okay, the core concepts are still same from the Angular 2 to Angular 11. Then mostly they do what? See, ultimately, no matter how big a company is, the Google's team is pretty capable. But obviously, whenever the product is being used by millions of developers, there are so many scenarios they try to use that application with. Okay, not all the scenarios can be tested in the development time of that product. So obviously there will be bugs. So they fix the bugs over a period of time. That is what they are releasing with all these new releases. They are fixing the bug. They are making the application more. They are making the product more stable. That is why it is getting one extremely popular nowadays. Okay, because already Angular is much stable. Okay, it is very stable. It is not having any issues and all. Still, they are constantly at keeping a watch on it and fixing any small issues available with the framework. Okay. So we need to understand why Angular. Okay. The next question is, we understand what is Angular, then we need to understand why Angular. Okay. So why Angular means it is providing us the expressive HTML. What do I mean when I say expressive HTML? Okay, we can create our custom HTML elements. Like we all know, we have we have already created custom HTML elements in Angular. Sorry, Angular JS. We can do the similar custom HTML elements. We can introduce our own elements. HTML elements using Angular, and also we can mix up the TypeScript or JavaScript code along with the HTML. That is what we can do. So I'll be using string interpolation, in the HTML directly, or I can write a for loop in the HTML directly. Okay, the same thing. Okay, so we are doing what? We are mixing up the framework syntax along with the TypeScript or JavaScript syntax. So that is the reason it is better to use Angular. I'm not saying, see, this why question I'm answering in the perspective of a web developer. Why a web developer need to use Angular? Okay, I'm not, see, these things are already available in AngularJS, right? We can write a for loop. We can mix up the HTML syntaxes in the HTML. We can write the JavaScript syntaxes. Basically, we are mixing up the JavaScript syntax along with the HTML syntax. So that's what I'm trying to make it clear. I'm not answering this why question in the perspective of an AngularJS developer. I'm answering this question in the perspective of a web developer. Why a web developer needs to use Angular? Because it is providing expressive HTML. It is providing what? We are being able to mix up the TypeScript or JavaScript code along with HTML. Okay, and it is providing a powerful data binding. Okay, and we'll be able to send data from the backend code to the HTML and from the HTML to the backend code in an easy manner. Okay. Before few minutes, I spoke about the data binding, different type of data bindings available. So those, they solve all the purposes in our web applications. Okay. Then so AngularJS is what makes it modular by design. Okay. As before few minutes I spoke about the lazy loading. So we are basically what we are we're loading the Angular modules on demand. That is a good thing to have it. Okay. Then we have the built-in backend integration. So why new Angular? Okay. Angular is built for speed because it is a modern framework. They have analyzed the single page applications in a much better way. It is much more faster. Okay, it is very it is built for speed. Okay, it is modern. It has a simplified API. Okay, if you compare about AngularJS and Angular, you need to memorize very less syntax compared to AngularJS. Okay, they have derived some patterns. If you follow that pattern, it will be very easy for you to understand. The syntactical part, it is very simple. You do not need to memorize a lot of things here. Okay, and it enhances productivity because of the reasons which I have mentioned above. Obviously, this is going to enhance the productivity of the developer. Okay. So when we are talking about how we can start with this, how we can start now coming to the question how, right? We understood what is Angular, why we need to use it, right? Where to use? We can use it with the web applications, right? To create web applications, we can use Angular. So the what question, why question we answered, the where question we answered, who question, obviously who is means us, because we are the ones we are trying to understand Angular, right? So these questions we have already answered. Now how we can start it, right? The how part is going to be the longer one because that is where that is what we will be understanding over the period of time. Okay. So in order to get started, right? We understood the prerequisites of it. Now we need to, how we can get started. We need to select the language. Okay. We need to select the language. We need to select the editor on which we will be writing this application. Okay. We'll be setting up the Angular application. Then we'll be understanding about Angular and TypeScript modules, because module is an important feature in Angular application here. Okay, and we'll be understanding about what are TypeScript modules. So in order to kickstart the application, in order to write the application or understand the basic parts of the application, we need to understand the Angular modules and TypeScript module. That is going to help us, start learning this. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, Ranjan, no.
Okay. Good. Now let's answer the first question: which language to choose? Okay. We can choose ECMAScript 5 or ECMAScript 2015. Okay, or TypeScript, or we can choose the language called Dart. Okay, so we can choose any one of them. There is no restriction with that. But we will be choosing what? We will be choosing TypeScript for this course. Okay, we'll be choosing TypeScript because the Angular libraries, the core libraries of Angular are itself written in using TypeScript. So it's not like I'm not. It's not a It's not like you cannot create the application using JavaScript. You can do it, but obviously that is the best possible combination using the TypeScript. It is the best possible combination to use. Okay. So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is an open source language. Okay. TypeScript is an open source language developed and maintained by Microsoft. Okay. It is the superset of JavaScript. Okay, it is the superset of JavaScript. When I say superset of JavaScript, that means what? Whatever we are writing in TypeScript, it is going to be converted into, it is going to be transpiled into plain JavaScript. So if I'm writing a class in TypeScript, it is going to be converted into a function in JavaScript by the TypeScript compiler. That process is going to be called as transpilation. Okay, that process is going to be called as transpilation. It is a strongly typed language. Okay, we all discussed about why we are using TypeScript here, because it is an object oriented programming language and it is a strongly typed language. JavaScript is a dynamic language, right? You cannot if you are assigning a different data type to a variable which is having a different data type, it is not going to complain, but because it is not strongly typed, right? But in a TypeScript is a strongly typed language. If you have declared a property as string, you cannot assign a number to it because it is strongly typed. Okay. Now, and it has class-based object orientation. So, okay. Now coming to the which editor to choose. Obviously, we just discussed about what language we'll be choosing. We discussed that we are going to choose TypeScript for this course, and which editor to choose. Okay, we'll be choosing. There are various options available. We can choose Visual Studio Code. We can choose Visual Studio, WebStorm, Atom, Eclipse, and there are various other editors also available in the market. You can choose any one of them. We will be choosing Visual Studio Code for this course because it is open source and lightweight IDE, and that complements the Angular in a very good way. Okay, it has built-in Git integration or the source control integration. It has a built-in terminals which help us to run our application easily. Okay, so prerequisites for setting up the application. What are the prerequisites we need to do? What are the things we need to do in order to set up the Angular application? Okay, we need to install npm. Okay, so what is npm? It is a command line utility, and it installs libraries, packages, and application. It is coming from the the Node.js family. The Node.js is having what? It is having a Node.js that is the web framework, like the web framework called Express and the server-side framework. It is server-side JavaScript, and it has a Node runtime, and it has what? No, it is having a Node package manager that helps us to install or maintain any packages available in our application. Okay. Now we need to obviously install the IDE because we are choosing Visual Studio Code as the IDE. Okay. We need to install Git. This step is optional. You may choose or you may use the default Windows command prompt. I'm not. That's why I mentioned it as what I mentioned it as the optional step. Then we need to install Angular CLI. Okay. Then we need to install Angular CLI. Angular CLI is what? It is a command line utility. Okay. Command line utility to help set up your Angular application. If you are not using Angular CLI, you need to create a lot of folders and files. Okay, we need to create a lot of folders and configurations in order to set up the Angular application. But if you are simply using Angular CLI, then what is going to happen is it is going to create the application with all the best practices implemented, all the package. So it is going to create a ready-made application available for us within minutes. Okay. So in order to set up the Angular CLI, okay, what we need to understand what is Angular CLI. It is a command line utility, right? For Angular, CLI makes it easy to create an application that already works right out of the box, also follows the best practices. So steps to create the application and run it. This is what all it is required to create the application and run it. These four commands you need to run. Okay. If you have before that you need to install npm. You need to install the IDE. Okay. Once you install that, because npm is already installed in your system, now you will be able to run the npm commands using npm install, right? So just run the command npm install -g for installing the Angular CLI in a global scope. Then we are saying install Angular CLI in the global scope. Okay. Then I'm saying what? Once you install the Angular CLI in the global scope, that means why we are installing it in the global scope? That means I'm going to create multiple applications. Okay. Multiple applications using Angular CLI in this particular system. Okay. That is why we are installing it in the global scope. So once you install that, then you can run the commands, the next commands. I'm going to do what? I'm going to I'm going to open git bash. Why I say I prefer to use git bash a little, because it is going to help me to directly run the command in this folder. Okay. And I'm going to do what? Because I have already completed the step 1, npm install -g @angular CLI. I can directly do what? I can directly run the, since I have installed Angular CLI, and Angular CLI is a command line utility. That means it is going to have the commands of its own. Okay. I can directly run what? Ng new, then whatever whatever name I want to give for my application. Okay, let me give it a name, Angular December 3. Okay. If I'm running this command now, it is going to directly create the application for me. Before doing that, I'm going to pass an additional parameter to this command. I'm going to do what? I'm going to do a dry run to it. Okay. I'm going to do a dry run to it. If you see what happened here is, it is showing, because it is not creating the application for me now. Okay. What it is doing is, it is giving me the idea, or it is showing me what are the things it is going to create when I am running this command without the dry run flag. That's what it is saying. The dry run flag means no changes were made, right? The dry run flag means what? No changes were made. Okay, what it is saying is, it is going to create a folder named Angular December 3. Okay, and it is going to do what? It is going to create some files like angular.json, package.json, readme.md, tsconfig.json, tslint.json. All these files are created, and inside the source folder, it is creating some app.module.ts, app.component.html, app.component.spec.ts, app.component.ts. So it is going to create a folder structure like this. Okay, so if you want to create it, okay, you need to run it without using the dry run flag. Okay, it is going to do what? It's going to, it created the folder for us, Angular December 3. right? And if you see, there is this package.json file. This package.json file is created for us by Angular CLI. So what it does is it creates the folder for us. Then what it will do is it is going to mention, so it created this package.json file also. So in the package.json file, it has mentioned some packages like the dependencies and their dependency it has mentioned. So these packages, these dependencies are what? These are going to help me to write the code of my application. That is why they are in the dependencies category. Then we have the dev dependencies section, right? The dev dependencies means what? These are going to help run our application. Obviously, we'll be using we'll be using TypeScript in our application, so that is why TypeScript is installed as a package. We'll be using unit testing using Karma and Jasmine. That's why these are installed also. If you see, there is one package Angular CLI is added in our application. So you will say this package.json is itself created by Angular CLI. Then why it is adding Angular CLI again as a package? So what happened here is earlier when we created the installed Angular CLI, we installed it in the global scope, right? Then when I was explaining about Angular CLI, I said what it is going to, it is going to create our it is going to help us to create our application, and also it is going to do what? It is going to help managing our application. It is going to help to create components, directives, services, pipes inside our application. Okay, that is why we need to install Angular CLI in the local scope also. Okay, that is the reason this one is added in the package.json. That means we need to install Angular CLI in the local scope also. That means for this application we are installing Angular CLI also. Okay, got it?
Yes, Ranjan. Yeah.
So if you see, once that folder is created, it is installing the packages. So it is it created the folder with the best practices available. Okay, and it is installing the packages for us. So if you see, there is this node modules folder that is where that this is where we will be installing the packages. It is currently installing it. Once it is installed, we'll be able to see, right? We'll be able to see all these packages available. We do not need to directly do anything. I'm just trying to explain you what is happening here. Once the application is installed, it is creating this node modules folder, and it is basically let it complete. It is going to take 3-4 minutes of time to complete. Let it complete. Okay.
So, sorry, Ranjan, we didn't follow you. You're waiting for something?
Yeah, it's installing actually.
Okay.
It's installing the packages. I'm just waiting for this to complete. Okay. Once it is completed, we'll be running this application.
So it's like you send your email, or where to we start actually? We have Visual Studio. We don't have the Visual Studio code. So we want to install that everything before.
No. As I said, installing any editor, you can use Visual Studio also. If
Okay.
you want, you can install Visual Studio Code. Okay.
Okay.
Because Visual Studio Code is a lightweight tool. It's
Okay.
only 40 MB or something.
Okay.
So it's a open source and lightweight. So you may install it. So it is actually it is easy to use Visual Studio Code for the Angular part. Okay,
Oh,
it's
okay.
again not like it's not a mandatory thing, but it's
Oh,
yeah, it's a just so as I said, just install the prerequisites to set up the application.
okay.
Install npm.
Mm,
Okay,
okay.
install npm. Then install if you want to use Visual Studio Code, then use Visual Studio Code. Install it. If you want to install Git, that is also optional. If you want to install it, or else you can use the default Windows command prompt. Then we need to install Angular CLI. To install Angular CLI, this is what we need to do. Okay.
Oh,
To
oh.
install Angular CLI, we need to run the command npm install -g at the Angular CLI.
Mm,
Then once Angular CLI is installed in the global scope, you will need to run this command ng new, then
okay.
the application name, whatever name you want to give. So
Okay.
we are currently in this particular step, ng new step. Okay.
Okay.
This
Okay.
ng new step is what it is going to create the folder for us, and it is going to, after creating the folder, it is going to install all the packages required for our application.
Oh,
So that is what it is doing now. It is installing the packages. Once it is installed, we'll be doing what? We'll be just changing the directory. Like obviously, we'll be going to the newly created directory.
okay.
Inside the directory, once I am inside the directory in the command prompt, I'll just run the command ngserve, and it is going to run the application. So if you see what happened here is the folders and files which it has created. We discussed that when it is going to create the when it is going to create the application for us, it is going to create the application with the all it is just a up and running application. Okay, with the basic set of functionalities implemented, it is just a hello world kind of application which is created for us with a sample piece of HTML already available for us. But
Okay.
yes, obviously we'll be implementing, we'll be doing adding functionalities into the same application.
Mm,
Okay, let
mm,
it run. I'll just let. I think it is still implementing the installing the packages.
okay.
Meanwhile, it is installing the packages. I'm going to explain you few other things. Okay, everything that we do, normally whatever I code I do in the courses or in the batches, I'll be doing what? I'll be creating a GitHub repository where I'll be putting all the code. Okay,
Okay.
let's say for each batch. Okay, I will create a GitHub repository. I'm not going to send the code manually because that is a cumbersome process, and we will not have a history and all. So we'll be doing what? We'll be committing the code to GitHub every day after the session. Okay. So
Okay.
each example we will be able to see the history, and so what particular thing we have done in that particular session, we will be able to see that history, and we'll be doing what? I'll be let it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. We'll come to that in a moment. Okay. So now
Okay.
that our application is successfully created, I need to do what? I need to just change directory to Angular December. So if you see this folder which is created for our new application, it is already having Git local repository installed for our application. Okay. So now all I need to do is I need to see this ng command. Ng serve we use for ng new we use to create the application. Now we can run the ng serve command. It is going to compile my application. Okay, it is going to compile my application, and okay, let it compile. Okay, meanwhile I'll just show it is going to take a couple of minutes to compile in the first time. After that it is going to be all smooth. Okay, I'll be doing what? Each of the session I'll be recording it, and I'll be uploading it to YouTube, and I will share the link like this. Okay, each of the session is going to be recorded and will be embedded to this site. We'll be creating a similar site for each of the batches. Okay, so that it will give you one-stop solution for, like, if you want to ever go through any recording, any particular session, or that you will be able to directly go, and it is serial wise, it is added date wise. Okay, you'll be able to see it's loading. Each and everything is going to be, all the sessions are going to be added here serially. Okay. First time it will take a little bit of time, 1 or 2 minutes. After that, it is not going to take that much time. Okay, now if you see, it is compiled. What it is saying, Angular live development server is listening on localhost 4200. Open your browser on http://localhost 4200. Okay, what I can do is I can just go and I will just open localhost 4200. If you see, whatever name we have given it to to our application, it is showing like that, and the title is also showing that. Okay, and as I said, it has just created a sample page for us. It is having like some sample information available for us. Obviously, we'll be removing these things and we'll be adding our own HTML into it. Okay, so and I think that should be it. Any questions?
No,
Okay. So each of the session is going to be what it is. It is going to be practical oriented. So I'll be explaining the concepts and I'll be implementing that in the code directly. So we'll be having no, it's going to be an interactive session basically. You can ask any questions if you want. Okay, if you have any questions, just ask in between. The class will be resolving it. Okay.
Thanks, Ranjan, for your time. So for tomorrow meeting, I will confirm you, and I will confirm you when the actual class will be started, and I will make the payments.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, we will discuss about it. Okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Ranjan.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Ranjan.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. I'll share the recording with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. After some time, I'll share the link of the recording. Today, I will just sharing the YouTube recording,
Yeah.
and over a period of time, we'll create that site for us. Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye.
bye.